Hi, family. Fifi here from wellnessparlor.com. Today, I just like to have a conversation with you about one of the things that I notice the most when I am doing holistic therapy with young men, right? So, in case you didn't know, I am a holistic therapist. I'm also a product maker. I've been doing it well over a decade, and so, I'm somewhat of an expert. So, this is a topic that I'm very familiar with. Um, I've noticed that there are a lot of tensions with young men when it comes to their sibling relationships. So, let's first start off with the young men that are younger than their siblings, and we're going to be talking about the male female dynamic, right? So maybe you have a young man who is either the youngest or has one or more older sisters, right? Now, with this particular dynamic, around the ages of between 10 and 12 is when the tension begins to raise its head and begins to be known, right? It becomes obvious at this point. What tends to happen is that there tends to be a power struggle and a push and pull between the two parties, be it the older sister slash sisters and the younger brother, right? Slash brothers. And the reason for this is because a lot of times, the older sister will be trained on how to take up a motherly role when it comes to the younger brother. So the older sister will become very responsible for the younger brother, and like in the case of, say, the West Indies, I can only speak on what I know. Coming from the West Indies, Guyana in particular, as the older sister, you could get beaten if your younger brother does something that's wrong, because you are seen as the guardian, the overarching authoritative person, right? The principal in charge in the absence of parents. So the elder sister will then internalize that type of dynamic when it comes to the younger brother. And around the ages of 10 to 13 is when the young male will then want to naturally mature and grow out of being coddled and wrapped up in cotton and always being told what to do and so on and so forth. And this can present um, a lot of problems and trust issues as the young man begins to mature, because as much as the older sister slash sisters would have been socialized in how to coddle them and care for them and protect them from the consequences of the world, we do not get unsocialized or unraveled on how to release them into the world with trust and respect. You understand? So that they may go on their own journey, especially in our community with the climate that we live in as Black people now. Even more so, there's more fear around those types of sibling relationships, because the fear that the woman will have for the male is very visceral, and in certain families, especially when there's been a lot of trauma, the female will then become even more so protective of the brother, but the brother will internalize that as not feeling respected and their growth not being allowed. And that is where the tension comes from, because as a young man, you don't want to stay a baby all of your life, right? And a lot of times, the feedback that I get from my clients, because my clients sometimes, parents bring 4 year olds to me because they're resistant to what's going on in the house and they need an intermediary that is able to effectively communicate where the wires got crossed, which is my job as a holistic therapist. What the young men in my therapy practice often say to me is that their view of me never evolved, and therefore I've never evolved. And I'm saying this as I'm parroting actually 10-year olds and 8-year olds. They will say, I am not a baby, but my sister treats me as such. And as such, it causes us to fight, sometimes physical fights, and it gets out of control. And, one of the things that I always have to explain to the parents, and for the parents to go then talk to the elder siblings sister, is that you infantilize young men when you don't give them the room to grow and the respect to make their own decisions. The minute you start hovering over your brother and always on his back about what he does, so on and so forth, because naturally as the elder sibling, you've known more of the world, you've seen more of the world. But at the same time, as a young woman, one thing that elder sisters don't take into account, and I am very guilty of this in the past, is that the experience that I am having, being 3 years older than my younger brother, is very different to the experience that he would be having as a young man in this world. And so for as much as I'm trying to help him to not step a foot wrong, so on and so forth, the methods that I have, most of them will not be able to be applied to him because he is having a completely different experience as a man in this world. And it took, a lot of friction with my younger brother and I for me to realize one day that, all of this care and concern and, caution, the three C's that I am expressing with him, the way that young men internalize that is not that she cares for me, she's concerned for me, so she's cautionary about me. It's that she doesn't respect me. That is how it is internalized by young men. And, a lot of times I have to explain to parents and older siblings that just because you do something does not mean that the way that you're intentioning it to be doesn't mean that that's the way it's coming across, because he's passing it through his filter. And so then we have to go about, redoing the whole dynamic of the relationship and starting from scratch, because care, caution, and concern can look like disrespect, you know? Like the way that I explain it to a lot of my clients, my best way of interpreting the information that I get from my, young men clients is that you, for example, you love your family, right? But love does not stop you from demeaning and disrespecting your family. You love them, but you'll still demean and disrespect them. However, you don't love your boss, but you respect your boss. And because you respect your boss and there are consequences, you will never demean and disrespect your boss. So this is the principle that, in my practice, we begin to tailor to the relationship so that the dynamic can be changed in a way that it is more fruitful for all involved. Because the one thing people get confused is that they think when young men begin to act out, it's because they um they enjoy acting out. And I'll say this to you, it is actually, based on the feedback that I get, it's very hurtful for young men when they have to act out like that, because they want to be in peace and in harmony at home. They don't want to be acting out, if they are of sound mind, that is. They don't want to be acting out. They actually want to be in peace and harmony at home. But when they feel like they're not being respected, they begin to act out as a way of beginning to proclaim their autonomy. Like, I am my own person, and I feel like you're overstepping a boundary. That's what the acting out really is about. You understand? So a lot of times, it is a different concept to grasp, but With the families and the young men that I work with, I explain to them that you don't treat a young man with, you don't lead with quote unquote love as we know it. You have to deal with him in terms of respect. Then and only then will he trust you enough that you are then able to love him. Think of the boss example again. You don't love your boss, but you respect your boss, so you have a certain decorum with your boss. It's the very same thing with these young men. You might love them, but you're also going to scream at them, you're going to call them out of their name, you're going to call them, tell them they need to man up, you're going to tell them that they need to do this and they need to stop behaving like females, so on and so forth. You're infantilizing them, but you love them. We need to take a different look at it. Lead with respect first. We have to learn how to, as they grow, provide room in our minds so that they could grow into great men. Not so that they could always be like, this is always my baby, and then wonder why he's like 36, unstable, can't hold down a job, is a monster, but he's your baby. You know what I mean? Like at some point, you have to grow up. In personal development, we used to say, if you're not growing, you're dying. And it's the same with relationships. We have to change the way that we look at people and bring the nature element first. So, yes, it's your brother, yes, it's your son, but he's a man at the end of the day. And we have to leave scope for him to mature and be the best that he could be without us. Then he will respect you. Otherwise, you'll just be coddling him and suffocating him. And before you know it, it will be decades, and there'll be this chasm between you two whereby he doesn't trust you and you can't figure out why he doesn't trust you. And it's because innately he knows that you're not looking at him as the man that he is now, but as the child that he once was. And that goes for both mothers and sisters. Sometimes those roles become a little blurry and they can become interchangeable as well. Okay, so as it comes to our young men, if they are under the authority of, say, an older sister and a mother, and there is no real masculine figure there for him to emulate, one of the best things that we could do is really to give them room to be men. Sometimes I think, as women, we think that boys are just females with penises. Honestly, the way that we treat them sometimes, it's like, yeah, he should know what I mean. No, that is a very feminine train of thought. He doesn't know what you mean, you know? And so we have to evolve the way that we deal with these young men, because more and more I'm seeing it come into my practice, this communication war. The man is speaking one language, and the sisters and the mothers, they're speaking a completely different language, and they think that he is just bad behaved for not caving to their language, and it doesn't work like that. A lot of times when a young man begins to grow into his masculinity, what you will end up with is 3 R's if there is a communication problem present. And the 3 R's, as defined by me, are random results, resentment, and resistance. And a lot of times when I see these types of complaints coming in to therapy, therapy with me is anywhere between 4 to 8 to 10 sessions. Typically, my clients, they don't need more than that, and they tend to come back maybe once a year and touch up. That's about it, right? When they come into therapy and I'm hearing of the misbehavior of young men and why they want them to come and see me, they usually fall under one or more of these, which is random results, resentment, and resistance. Because that is what ensues when a young man feels as though as if You are not giving him the room in which to grow. And you know, something else that people don't take into consideration, if you have raised a young man and you've instilled all that you can in him, but then when he hits a certain age, you know, about that 15, 16, coming up to 18, 19, 20s, 21 tend to be very rocky. When he hits those milestones and you begin to doubt his every move, um, act in such a way that he is not, it's like he's incapable of making proper decisions, so you always have to hover over him and you don't release him in the way that he can then feel like, you know, this person has my back, but this decision is my own. Failure is always there. Everybody fails the first times that they try something, but there is a different standard for young men when they begin failing. It's like, you should have listened to me. I told you so and so and so, but you're not having his experience. And so that might be one of the reasons that he doesn't listen to you, because he's not seeing himself mirrored in the advice and the examples, and he doesn't feel that he could trust you. It is very interesting when young men reach this precipice, because one of the things that I always say to the parents is, are you insecure about your parenting? And this often provokes shock and horror. But the reason I ask them that question is this: if you've instilled the best in your child that you could, but then when they begin to find their feet and go out into the world, all of a sudden you're like, no, come back. I want you out there. Then the message that you're sending to yourself and to the child simultaneously is that I don't have confidence in what I taught you. I don't think that what I taught you is going to work out. I think I gave you some bad advice. That's why I don't want you out there. When the child internalizes that, he then doesn't trust you, because he's like, you told me X, Y, and Z all the time growing up, and now that I'm beginning to express myself, it is looked down upon. This is very strange, and it's sending mixed signals. That is how the young men internalize that bipolar attitude that comes from the women that are over them. Like, on the one hand, you need to be a man about X, Y, and Z, but then when you're ready to express yourself as a man, it is unacceptable. So in this video, I really just wanted to have you really think about the men in your life familially and your relationship to them based on nature first, just as a male and a female. Because remember, male and female come first. The relationship, the labels come afterwards. And just because a young man is your younger brother or younger cousin, or he's under you as a woman, does not mean that he is any less of a man. He still needs to find his footing in his masculinity so that he can then navigate the world from a position of strength. Okay? Okay. So I hope this video made you think. And um, if it upset you and it provoked you, good, very good. That means that there's something stirring there that needs to be looked at. I appreciate that. Okay? So have a good day, and remember to leave room for the young men in your life to become fully grown men, and stop infantilizing them, because they will punish you for the rest of your days for it, and it's not going to be pretty. Okay? Okay.